Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us for this first actual CVA Social Club. Meeting together, having a chat in a more relaxed environment with a glass of wine, a glass of water, whatever you prefer, and having a deep talk about interesting topics. So my name is Dennis Flatt. I'm the chair of the Enterprise Blockchain Working Group from the CVA. The Enterprise Blockchain Working Group has one objective, and that is really to promote the usage of blockchain in the enterprise world. So we will not talk about digital assets, at least not about Bitcoin and halves and all these things. We will talk here how we can use that technology in an enterprise environment. And so I'm very honored to have two guests with me today. One side we have Carmen Cucul. She is in the commercial space of developing, researching pharmaceutical products from the R&D down to the downstream. So when it's consumer testing areas. And Clarisse Dias da Mota, Vice President, Strategy, Operations, and Ecosystems at PharmaLedger. And I'm very honored, very honored that we have these talks today. And thank you very much for joining us. Well, Carmen, in your area, I mean, the impact of blockchain, and we talked as well before about AI, for example.
Yeah.
So when you look at it, what would be the real impact of these new technologies in your daily work?
Yeah. So first of all, I will try to see if everyone also in the room can hear us without the mics. If that is okay. Come closer, because otherwise I think it will be difficult for the online audience. So I've been working for 10 years in pharmaceutical industry, somehow ending in selling or implementing digital innovation. I ended up always doing digital innovation. Of course, when I started, it wasn't about blockchain. It wasn't even about AI. But what I learned, and maybe I will try today to be the devil advocate in a way, is selling innovation in a large established enterprise that has a decently well-functioning business model, like most pharmaceutical companies are, is not easy, especially if you're trying to sell disruptive innovation. So what I learned quite early is to try to find the role of digital innovation, let's say blockchain, in something that makes sense, right? Incremental innovation with a bit of pragmatism. So I was thinking, what is blockchain? Blockchain is a platform that enables external collaboration around data, right? From an enterprise perspective. And then I was trying to think, in the pharmaceutical industry, which use cases or in which situations such a big enterprise with very strong business models, double-digit profits already, where would be the interest for a CEO or a finance department to look into an innovation to disrupt their business model? And I realized if it's about external collaboration around data, there are three criteria that I realized. It's a bit theoretical, but then I'll give you an example of yes and no. So the data needs to be critical for the business, right? For the business model, quite obvious, but important. The generation of data should be done by external parties that the enterprise cannot control, right? So the more external parties are generating this data, the more difficult for the enterprises to reach out and collect the data in a different way. So there is a need there, right? And the third one is who uses the data. The more this data is used by external stakeholders, the better. Now, very theoretical, of course, we start from there. An example of where blockchain would not make sense is a CRM, let's say CRM, sales data. Important for the business, yes. Are they generated by a lot of external stakeholders? Not really. We can buy data, access is very easy. Is it used by external stakeholders? Not really. It's usually for internal stakeholders to set up bonuses, whatever. Now, a case where blockchain would work with the same model would be decentralized health data. Or I think, Clarisse, you will cover a lot of other things, supply chain. Yeah, there are many other things. But in this case, health data, important, absolutely. if you don't work in pharma, probably you don't know, but 80% of the price of the medicine is data, is clinical trial, right? This data is generated by millions of patients outside of clinical trials, super difficult to get access. And mostly where this data is used is by regulators or healthcare professionals to decide whether to grant access to the medicine, to prescribe. So in these cases, blockchain makes sense. And that, yeah, somehow I wanted to reiterate this pragmatic approach in a way to innovation, especially in the context of companies that already work well and they already, have a double-digit revenue that is sustainable for the time being.
Yeah.
So that would be a long answer to.
It is very interesting what you say, because I remember half of my family, of my relatives, are working in pharma. So that's why I know a bit about it. But when we had COVID,
Yeah.
then basically my brother-in-law told me, you know what was funny about COVID? It was not a problem to get data. Because everybody was so panicking, and we shared data across companies. Hoffman Laber shared data with Novartis and so on, things that would usually be not possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's as well something that PharmaLedger actually wants to help with by their work in the blockchain area. So what is the impact of blockchain for PharmaLedger and for your business, Clarisse?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Hello, everybody. Blockchain is the enabler, not blockchain per se, because we believe that there will continue to be evolution of how the technology goes. The technology may be ready, but blockchain per se and the hype that was created around blockchain becomes an enabler for a conversation opener. All of a sudden, we now have the possibility of imagining solutions which are impacting competitors and the entire supply chain of medications or the clinical trial stakeholders as a whole. And for the first time, we have an opportunity of preserving sensitive data while transferring data at ease. This was not possible before, in a secure way that would fulfill requirements that regulate the healthcare space and the pharma space. As Carmen well said, data is the core, is at the core of the business model of the pharmaceutical industry, and I would say of healthcare. We are all patients here, and we all know the value that our data as a patient has to ourselves, and how the access to that, if it is democratic and we have access from multiple parties, it makes our life easier in taking care of ourselves and taking care of others. So blockchain is actually the conversation starter. I don't like to say that blockchain is the beginning and the end. Blockchain is really just the opportunity for us to say there is a new opportunity out there for us to collaborate in a different way, in a pre-competition way, in a way where we can invest in a shared infrastructure and make sure that this unavoidable digital disruption that is happening with multiple applications have a home that is secure, that has standards, and that fulfills regulatory requirements. So it is the beginning. Blockchain is the beginning. It's not there for sure where this phase of decentralization is more the topic.
Yeah.
Blockchain is the first element because it's the most hyped and the beginning of it. I hear you. I think you agree.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the title of this is the backbone for skeleton of drones, and yeah, it's definitely an important backbone. At the end, it is a network. At the end, when you take it very clear, it's a network, and only as valuable of what you are doing on the network.
Yeah.
So, and then always comes the question about the use cases. What are the key use cases? And I know, for example, Clarisse, you have 3 core use cases in PharmaLedger. So one is the product trust, one is the decentralized trials, and one is the supply chain. Can you tell us a little bit, so what is the status of these use cases at PharmaLedger?
Right.
And how happy are you with them?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of happiness. I think it's a matter of resilience at this point, right? It's a matter of you understanding that blockchain and decentralized systems are still in their infancy, and they are still used in a localized manner. right? So there are lots of companies every day coming up and saying, we are using blockchain, we are developing blockchain, we are creating products with blockchain. But the truth is that it's still everything happening in a siloed manner, even for a decentralized system. So in PharmaLedger, so I don't know how much you've heard of PharmaLedger, but PharmaLedger started as a joint undertaking between the European Union and the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, a joint investment into a research about, can this technology help us solve some of the pressing issues of healthcare? Not only of pharma. Pharma is one key element of healthcare, but healthcare is way broader than that. So during that project, we researched, it was very democratic, and we went through a series of use cases and voting by the members of what are the use cases that you're most interested on. And after going from 90 something use cases to 25 use cases to up to 8 use cases we landed, we realized that actually it formed a value chain on its own, the use cases that had the most interest. And what I mean with value chain, not supply chain, but value chain, is that use cases were spread from research and development up to personalized medicines, then to supply chain. And then we realized that, okay, from the moment in which we build this organization, this pre-competition, non-profit association that is trying to bring the stakeholders of healthcare together to co-create around those use cases, we realized that actually we had already a set of use cases that had been researched on and that we should bring into the organization as and put it on store and wait for the right moment to reaccelerate and ignite the development and testing and deployment of those. So those happen to be classified within specific areas. And with that, as part of the strategy of PLA, we imagined the digital trust ecosystem, which is this infrastructure that connects a platform for product trust, where we look at electronic product information and patient interaction applications, that it looks for detecting falsified medicines. So anything that brings trust in the medication that you have in front of you would fit within that product trust platform. So there are multiple use cases within those platforms. Then decentralized trials, where you would have a link with supply chain when it comes to clinical supply, for example. How do you monitor and ensure that the medications which are not yet serialized and finalized, how they reach the right patients, and how can we help clinical trials to have higher adherence and lower dropping rates to accelerate the production and discovery of medications, going through also personalized medicines, connecting IoT devices, and etc. And then also the supply chain is, the whole supply chain of pharma and of healthcare is a big use case for decentralized, trusted systems like blockchain. So 3 platforms encompassed by what we call the digital trust ecosystem.
I found it interesting that in the pharmaceutical industry, it seems to work that you find the standard for managing on tracking the supply chain. While when I looked at the financial industry, I mean, we had blockchain use cases and they all failed recently and went bankrupt, basically. So I find it quite interesting that in the industry, and it shows when really everybody wants to participate and sees an added value in it, then it's going to work. But when everybody is only half-hearted with it, then it's not going to work. Would you agree to that statement?
Who is everybody? First, I would ask, because we were just having a chat. I have a colleague here from a PLA member from Alpac, Christoph is here, and we were just talking about that. So you can have pharma companies and service providers, and the world of healthcare is really, really big. And very often you have the organizations that can invest and have that, disposed capital to be able to invest on innovation without being hurt by it failing. Those organizations are also very large in number of staff. So the right person interacting with the initiative is key. Having the support and having visionary leadership is key for that to go forward.
Something you would say when you look at successful use cases? First of all, what are successful use cases from your perspective, and second, what would you say is key for them?
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't know much about pharma to pharma collaboration. I think that's your area of expertise. I was more thinking about, how businesses go to market and be successful, right? And then apply in a way that framework into how would we sell, let's say, a blockchain into a market, which would be the enterprise, internal enterprise, right? So I can bring some contributions from that side, but then I think the more interesting case is industry platforms, right? Which you mentioned. So, very simply how businesses succeed in market if they have the right product, addressing the right customer at the right time for the right price. So super simple. But then what would it mean for us to sell the product, which is, let's say, the blockchain within the enterprise? Having the right product, I think, is what I alluded to before, a use case where it makes sense, where data is important for the business. It cannot be easily captured by the enterprise in another way, and where the use of the data is by external stakeholders that the enterprise cannot control, right? So quite simple. That's internal. Externally, the right product, I would agree with Clarisse, is the one where the users don't know what they're using is based on blockchain. It's a little bit like the HTTP or whatever emails work on. Like, do we need to know as consumers that the technology that we use to exchange emails is a specific one? Not really. Just the product needs to be relevant for what we need, easy to use, and trusted, right? So quite simple things in terms of the first kind of key success factor is having the right product. I think the second one, and let's see how much time we have for the other two, is the right customer. And I think since blockchain, and I think it's less than 10 years, maybe 7 years, that blockchain has been used in enterprise settings, especially in pharma. I think you guys were probably the first using it. So for such a young technology to be implemented in enterprise setting, I think having the right customer is probably the most important of the four pillars at this point, right? So role of sponsors, role of partners internally, finding them externally as well, KOLs. I think the most difficult part, and probably we will talk about it, is for the enterprises, for pharma companies to work collaboratively with their stakeholders and understand they're not the center of the universe. Even if we all say we're patient-centric, it's very difficult to do that. So finding that internal stakeholder that accepts and agrees and is driven by either fear or greed in a way to accept innovation is probably the most important. And then being on the right time, I think we all know what's happening in the world. If we want to go to the CEO to say, can you give me a multi-million dollar budget for 5 years to implement something on blockchain? Probably they'll say, have you seen inflation? Have you seen interest rates? Have you seen the economy? No, right? So timing will be important, as well as the price. And when I say price, it's probably the business case. And I think you guys work in healthcare or large organizations. Would you raise your hand if you do? Okay. You would know what is a business case, obviously. Nothing is approved and goes in a large organization without a business case. For the rest, probably it's something a bit foreign. What is most important, again, is to win the business case before it's presented, right? Nothing new here for you guys, but I find those 4 elements as critical success factors. And probably they're not blockchain specific, you would realize that. But I think innovation is just innovation, is change management, is a business case, well done. And I would probably call it here.
Yeah, let's deep dive on success factors in a second. But I would as well to take or to give the opportunity to the audience here in Zug to ask questions when you have a question for our 2 panelists here. There's one.
I have one. Sorry, that came too quickly. To what extent is in that business, without disruption of all the elements, distribution, and especially the medical distribution system, which is very costly, pretty ineffective, to what extent would we need disruption on that level as well to move forward? Because if you're just using blockchain technology and the established world of pharmaceutical industry, it's just probably an efficiency case.
Yeah.
And the other, I'm pretty much missing, not only in this industry, but also in other industry, but particularly in that industry, some sort of more disruptive way to
Okay.
make things different.
Good. I just repeat the question so that the people online can hear us as well. So the question was, does it need a disruption, especially of the distribution network as well within the pharmaceutical area? Because for the blockchain is seen as an efficiency gain winner, but when I understand it correct, you know, what is when you have certain distribution gatekeepers in there? And would they need to be disrupted by blockchain technology too, or are there partners in that change?
Yeah.
Who wants to take the question?
I can take a.
Take it up, sir.
So this would be a little bit a mix of an experience and a personal view to that, right? So I personally do not like to use the word disruption. The healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical industry is a very conservative environment. It is going to be extremely harder than what it is already if we start talking about disruption. Disruption gives you a feeling of something will be discontinued, something you may start, may not, right? So I like to look at the idea that it will need adoption. For adoption on initial use cases and initial maybe business cases that will pay off less than what the bigger vision could bring. So it will need vision, it will need appetite, it will need investment. This is part of the challenge of getting it together and making it happen. But if you envision the benefits of it, there are new business models that will come because of the adoption of a decentralized supply chain, for instance. So it is, for me, less about disruption and more about adoption and getting together in the idea that before we invest so much money into deploying applications into multiple markets and competing in areas that are not our, core competitive value, let's get together on a pre-competition setting where we can agree the rules of the game and then everybody can put their applications on top. So it's about adoption. For me, it's not about disruption. Disruption is a consequence. But would you like to have a supply chain of medications disrupted? I know I would not like, because I wouldn't get my meds. So ultimately, I want the organizations that surround that supply chain to adopt new technologies so they can better serve me. I don't want them to disrupt anything.
Yeah, maybe my take would be, if your question would be, does the business model of the entire, research and development of a medicine, how medicine is brought to the market, should that be disrupted? I would say, of course. It takes 10 to 15 years to bring a medicine to market and $2 to $3 billion. So imagine if, that cost would be, and time would be reduced by half, how much would we pay for our medicine? Much less. So huge disruption would be fantastic for society. In this case, would the blockchain be the enabler and the accelerator of that change? I don't think so. I think it would be AI. And I start to promise that for the benefit. And then blockchain could be the enabler, right? Could be the support. And I think we will get to this use case. So I would say yes for disruption overall. I couldn't talk about manufacturing, but in the R&D space, I think we all would benefit if we paid half the price of the medicines, and we would get them, especially for diseases that don't have a treatment right now, if we would get them much faster. Then the other disruption would be in kind of downstream in once the medicine is in, there's a lot of health, and my focus is on decentralized health data and who owns that data, right? So in the real world, we take medicines, we get care for whatever we do. That data doesn't belong to us right now, right? It belongs to the hospital, it belongs to the clinical trial sponsor, it belongs to the pharma industry. should that data be ours, and should we be the owners and the beneficiaries, and could we benefit, could we be the ones who share our own data? Of course.
Yes, I would say.
That should be the real transformation. Is the pharma industry the first to jump in the train of transformation and disruption on that side? Probably not without regulation and a bit of community push, but both areas should be disrupted, I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, that is pretty much in line what we discussed as well in the enterprise blockchain working group once. It's one of the key success factors is, well, don't disrupt the incumbent, because when you try to do that, you will lose and your innovation will not succeed. So one aspect of success factors that we said there is, well, we need to have easy plugins from existing processes and existing workflows into the blockchain network and the blockchain use case behind that. And when you achieve that, and the existing companies on the market don't have to change too much in their existing workflows, then that is definitely one factor that needs to be happened, that the entire thing becomes a success. You mentioned a use case in the R&D space that you would say that is quite where blockchain really plays an important role. Can you deep dive on that one a bit?
Yes, because I was just researching, we're preparing a report through CVA, through Sustainability Working Group, to look at some decentralized health data practices. And for example, I came across, it's about what we were discussing, R&D, research and development takes 10 to 15 years, 2 to 3 billion, what if we could disrupt that and cut it in half? And apparently one company which is in silico medicine, probably some of you, I think that Natalia, probably you know about it. They're a US biotech, and they say, I haven't confirmed that, I only know the information from public information, is that their entire R&D process, so from preclinical trial to clinical trial to kind of commercialization, is run through AI. And what they have noticed is that they reduce by half the time and the cost to bring new medicines to the market. So that's AI. You would say, what does it have to do with blockchain? Now, what I anticipated, I think we already see what is happening, is AI has this problem of being a black box, right? And especially deep neural networks that evolve very quickly. At some point, nobody really knows how these models, are trained, what weights do they use, what variables, why did they take a decision, is the data unbiased, biased, representative. So I see very soon, because AI is such a success already and has such a potential to disrupt and for the good, I see very soon in pharma, especially in healthcare, the regulators and the healthcare professionals asking, the producers, let's say an enterprise like ours, say, what is the data set you use your AI model? Is it biased? Is it representative? Why did you choose these variables versus the others? Why are you recommending me this treatment versus the other? Right. So I think that is a very interesting and exciting use case that has momentum and has tangible benefits. Right. So through AI, okay, that's fair, and it will be required. I don't see it not being required to explain basically the AI model and how blockchain can do that. It's an open ledger, it's traceable, it's auditable. There is decentralized file computing, where data sets can stay and be tracked. So there is an industry opening up.
So it is like, you see the case in, there's the digital twin of data, or the trust-proven data set that you have. And I mean, that is very similar to the product trust that PharmaLedger is working on. What it all means as well, and we have not talked about that success factor yet, which is, I mean, you just covered a bit on it, which is standardization and governance. That is as well. I mean, PharmaLedger, I understand that PharmaLedger is actually this kind of governance or a standardization body within the pharma industry, isn't it?
It's what we aspire to get to, of course. So PharmaLedger Association is now 1 year and few months old as a legal entity, as a formed incorporated association. And we say that we have the purpose is the enablement of the digital trust ecosystem, as I said, but the mission is to help, the companies that are within the sector to solve problems that they cannot solve alone. And to achieve that, we, as you said, well, especially in the area of healthcare, you need to do that through collaboration, facilitation, governance, development of standards, or acceptance and formalization of de facto standards that already exist through other players in the market. And yes, the PharmaLedger Association aims to support the industry throughout that journey of facing the challenges and the opportunities that AI, for example, will bring. I absolutely agree with Carmen. I think for us to explore and to enable the true potential that AI can bring to healthcare, we need to agree on the ground rules of how that will operate, and that has to be auditable, that has to be transparent to the right empowered folks, and you cannot achieve that, you cannot regulate AI through AI, right? So you will need a pairing of an additional technology that can give you that kind of transparency and security around data. Yeah.
You mentioned before that it is, blockchain is like HTML or email. Like it is a technology that runs in the backbone, and people don't really need to understand the technology, but they need to understand the value that it brings for them, the case for it, because as you said, the right product at the right moment at the right customer, which, by the way, is how I earn my money. And I can tell you, it is not that easy. No, but and now we talk here about something very sensitive, and that is data about your health.
Yeah.
And we need that data from the people.
Yeah.
And how do you see we can? What do we need to do that people are trusting that here, yes, this is now blockchain, but they don't know blockchain because it's in the backbone, it's somewhere in between. We all are experts, we trust blockchain and the technology, but the normal person on the street, the normal person that doesn't care about blockchain, they care about, do I smoke a cigarette today or not? So how do we convince them that they should give their data for R&D in healthcare and getting medications faster?
First, we give them access to their own data. So I would start there, right? So before you can ask to use their data, because as Carmen said, nowadays the data that belongs to each of us is actually belonging and being used by private servers of commercial independent organizations that do not share that profit with me as the data owner. So ultimately, for me, there are several aspects to that. The first one is that make data available to them in a format they can see value and they can consume. Imagine a person with a chronic illness or a person that discovers a new diagnosis. That person should know where to go, which app to download, where he or she can get all of their previous examinations and etc. in there. So just that already helps you manage your health differently and feel more secure that you have an overview. Nowadays, and when I say we, I say the industry, puts patients through a lot harder situations when they go through their illnesses. So this is one aspect. Second, democratize monetization of data. My data, for example, there are several chronic and genetic illnesses in most families in the world. All of us have been affected by an illness in our families, close to us, or even ourselves. I personally, and I actually would feel interested in knowing if the audience agrees, I would feel very happy to volunteer my data for research of certain diseases that I care about personally. For other diseases, I would maybe perhaps allow if I can monetize that. Maybe it can be instead of a side hustle, I can earn some money from that. I can feel that I am not excluded from that profitization of data, right? And the second aspect is include patient representatives in the discussion. It's not about developing a commercial process. There are so many patient organizations that are claiming for a space at a table, a voice. invite them. They would voluntarily come and support and give you an opinion and run through their, volunteers an opinion about what you were doing. Before you go to market with a risky investment, test it with your intended audience, which are the patients.
Fully agree. And I think a very, very specific and tangible benefit of blockchain, even if consumers wouldn't call it blockchain, is tokenization, right? So we're still early, again, 17 years with blockchain and tokens, but as soon as that model works, I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel in terms of how consumers, regular users, can benefit from their data. And I think the incentive models are key here. But before that, I think as a blockchain applications, consumer blockchain applications, not, let's say, pharma-driven or anything, it's still usability. So we're nowhere there with the blockchain applications I've seen. You guys, I don't know if you've tried any blockchain applications for health data management or some other things. Usability, UX, UI is still not there, right? So we're still struggling with login, remember 15 passcode, passwords, whatever seed code. So I think that's the first hurdle to cross by the blockchain industry. And I think once we get that with the incentive model that is emerging from blockchain, which I love, I think it's brilliant. Tokenization is brilliant. Consensus mechanisms are brilliant. I think the other part, then you ask, how can patients trust pharma in this setting, is I think when pharma will decide to be part of the ecosystem, but not in the center and not outside. So what I notice now in pharma, especially in this kind of digital health space, it's a dial, right? It's on off, it's not in between. You either, I give you a grant, if you're a pharma, patient organization or a startup, I give you a grant, you do whatever you want. I don't want to see the patient data. I cannot, I don't want to have anything with it. Or I say, it's so critical to me, I internalize it. I build my, enterprise data lakes. I build my enterprise platform, it's mine. But then there's nothing in between at this point. And I think if value-based partnerships where pharma is an equal partner with a healthcare provider, with an insurer, with a patient group, sitting at the table with a patient in the center, as it should be, as we all say, that's what we aspire for, then the trust issue would be solved from a consumer perspective towards pharma, I think. Long story, but hopefully helpful.
I really think that there is as a basic, when you now could take the discussion even into psychology, consumer psychology, then you see actually a motivation of everybody because, as you said, when it helps, if my data helps actually to help myself potentially about suffering from diseases, I'm quite willing to do that. But we're not approaching the customers yet with those psychological, simple demands there. So is there another question from the audience here in the chat? Yes.
We have different political systems running healthcare systems across the globe. Now that's a major hurdle to what we've been talking about. Because in Europe, we're very socialized in medical care. In America, it's consumer, customer driven. And without a consensus between two or three of the major consuming groups, will we ever reach what we're talking to?
So the question was, there are different governmental systems behind healthcare. For example, Europe, which is more social driven, while the US is totally differently motivated. So what are their bases or what are their experiences of going across different governmental problems and governmental areas?
I can start with an example. So I recognize, even from an enterprise perspective, going to market, the business models are so different, right? And it's mostly Europe versus US, as you say. Asia, I think it's kind of a mix in between. What I think will help is regulation, and regulation is coming. For example, in Europe, I think by next year, there will be a European Health Data Space Act or something like this. There's regulation that is coming and enforcing and asking all EU member states to share health data across borders within EU, with the rhythms of GDPR, but the data needs to be transferable across healthcare systems within Europe and needs to be accessible to the patient, right? So exactly the pillars that we were missing to say regulation, if the big enterprises won't change, regulation will ask them to change. It's a little bit what happens with the big tech companies, no? The regulators are starting to understand, Apple, Google, maybe we need to do something about all the data they have. For US, I wouldn't be able to comment. I don't know that market well, but I think overall regulation comes, and regulation will empower patients more than, in the balance of between enterprises and individuals, again, like Apple and Google versus us consumers, we will get a leverage point there. And that will be probably the base of decentralization with blockchain, if it helps.
And you, Clarisse?
I think you touch a super complex aspect of adoption, right? I tend to look at regulation as a reactive movement rather than an innovative movement. Very rarely you will see a regulation that comes out of a future idea or a value proposition that is not yet realized. The role of the regulators in the health space is also to look at innovation, but we know historically that it's much more a reactive movement to a fact or a situation that is already happening and needs remediation or needs some type of control or ground rules, as what we are saying. So I can speak about how we are approaching that from the PharmaLedger perspective. First, we look at regulators as another but key stakeholder within that space, right? They are not more or less important than the patients. They are not more or less important than the service companies that provide services to healthcare or even the pharmas. We look at the healthcare stakeholders as each of them having their lane, but all having the same relevance to make that transformation that we envision in terms of a shared infrastructure for healthcare to be realized. Now, at this stage that we are, when we speak about blockchain and decentralized systems being in their infancy and still very localized, the effort we make is of awareness, education, and value proposition. So we do, and we did several conversations with the European Medicines Agency, either through PLA itself or through our members. So PLA is then providing and supporting the members whenever those conversations happen, or the members talk to their industry associations that then talk to the regulators. So it is a lot about, very often, regulators, they are few steps behind the market, right? Because the market keeps moving into an innovation pace and regulators are a little bit behind. So we have to be kind with them as well, right? They're trying to control something that is already live for 5-10 years. So what we do is try to tell them, how can we bridge that gap of what you're trying to regulate now, you're creating? And I can give an example. We have the electronic product information of PharmaLedger is the product that is out there. And it's fantastic, has been co-created with patients, with pharma, with service providers, has a lot of value proposition to it. We face the barrier that because after COVID, all this digitalization of everything already started, regulators started reacting to it. So what they thought, okay, if everything is going to go digital, let's create a central repository that is owned by the regulator, and then we can validate that those leaflets are actually the ones that are supposed to be there. And our role is to tell them, hey, great, you are doing that because that's necessary. It's already happening. But look, we have something here that you can put in your roadmap. So you can also envision what is going to happen and what is going to disrupt that the current way of doing things and anticipate those changes. So your researchers can start looking at what we are doing. That's what we do. If anybody has another idea how to approach regulators in a way that helps them, please, get my number and we should have a talk.
We need a one for that.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, that was very interesting. I think we saw there are definitely use cases.
Yeah.
On the way, there are existing use cases already. Otherwise, the regulator would not react at all. and I'm looking forward for the next couple of years because it sounds like very exciting times in pharma, changing with AI and with blockchain technology environments. So thank you very much, Clarisse and Carmen, for the
Thank
time.
you for having us.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. Huh?
So we will have here still time for a glass of wine and some direct conversations to the people online, and say very much thank you to you to participate. And we're looking forward to future social club events and the CVA here in the shed or in a venue as well in Zurich. And yeah, please join us for the other ones then as well. And we thank you very much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.